For more on all this, some analysis, let's go to Ian Bremmer, president and founder of Eurasia Group and GZERO Media. Ian, good morning to you. You've got a reputation for seeing these things clearly, so let's talk as plainly as we can for the rest of us here. What does it mean for Russia to recognize these independent regions in Ukraine and then cross the border? Is that not an invasion?
It is an invasion. It is the end of the Minsk process. The Americans, the Europeans have coordinated in saying that this was unacceptable and that sanctions would result as a consequence. It is the failure of the negotiations process that the Americans and our European allies have been working on assiduously for months now. I also want to say, Tony, very importantly, this is a slap in the face to the Chinese. You'll remember President Putin went to Beijing as part of the opening ceremonies for the Olympics and got the strongest coordinated support from Xi Jinping that the Russians have received in the post-Cold War era. But the Chinese said explicitly, we want the Minsk agreements to be the basis going forward. We want negotiations. We recognize the territorial integrity of Ukraine. President Putin has just slapped in the face his most important major friend on the global stage. And we have not yet heard the Chinese respond to his measures. I am exceedingly interested in what the first statements from the Chinese will reflect.
So if you're right, he's upsetting the Chinese, he's upsetting NATO, he's upsetting the Biden administration. Why is Ukraine so important to Putin, and why should Americans care?
Well, Americans should care because we're entering a new Cold War with the Russians. And they are the major exporter of gas to Europe. You saw that prices now are at 7-year highs. That's going to affect every American at the pump. The Russians are a country with basically offensive cyber capabilities that are roughly at parity with the United States. You remember when they attacked the Colonial Pipeline, brought a lot of Americans offline and lacking energy. They stopped doing that when Biden warned them for a few months, but they've now called the Americans bluff, so cyber attacks are likely to come again. That really matters to us as well. But why are the Russians doing this? Why do they care so much about Ukraine? Because Putin believes that the collapse of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical disaster of the 20th century, and he's trying to rebuild it. And you will see that with the new constitution in Belarus on February 28th. It will no longer be neutral. It will no longer be non-nuclear, and the Russians will likely establish permanent integration and bases there. You will probably see it in places like Moldova, where the breakaway Republic of Transnistria right now is looking to place the same request for Russian recognition that you've seen from Donbass in the last 24 hours. And most importantly, 44 million Ukrainians that Putin never believed should have been independent. They should have been a part of the Soviet Union and Russia, and he's trying to rebuild that right now.
So, Ian, if the international community wants to stop all this, let's talk about how. You said diplomacy has failed. Let's talk sanctions. We just heard this morning that the chancellor in Germany is halting, careful language there, this major pipeline between Russia and Germany. Will that be enough? What more needs to happen on the sanction front?
Look, you can't use all of your sanctions right now because the Russians are not yet in territory that the Ukrainians presently occupy, even though they are directly in Ukrainian territory. I think if Ukrainians start getting killed and they roll tanks into Ukrainian territory that the Russians hadn't previously held post-2014, then you'll see more sanctions from the United States and Europe. But to be clear, you are going to see more sanctions from the Americans today. You already see that Nord Stream 2 is being announced effectively dead, and this is an enormous project that they've been working on for years now. There'll be some financial sanctions. There'll be some other sanctions from the Americans, but Putin has already factored all of that in. You are not going to prevent the Russians from taking further action through sanctions. If there's further action that's going to be prevented, it will become because either the Russians believe that they can get what they want through other means, and that means either negotiations or the Ukrainians suing peace, or because the Chinese decide to push them hard. We will watch that.
Ian, we will watch that. Ian Bremmer, we appreciate you cutting through the noise for us this morning. Thank you very much.